regard. Well and good, but the question becomes, what does the identity conversation have to do with business? How can we use this idea to actually influence particularly our branding and corporate branding work? There is a missing piece in the model, and that missing piece is the direction, the future orientation that strategists and top executives bring to the table. We have chosen to represent this force as vision. So the identity model really talks about the conversation between the culture, the inside of the organization, and the stakeholders who formulate images outside of the organization, but yet we need a third component. How many of you juggle? Got any jugglers in the audience? How many have tried to juggle? Yeah, with the balls. 2 balls is easy. 3 balls is difficult. Massively more difficult than 2. Adding vision to culture and image is like juggling with 3 balls. It takes a lot of concentration and a lot of practice to get there. And so it wasn't a simple matter to go from the identity conversation to the notion of alignment between vision, culture, and image. But we believe it's worth the effort. When we add vision, we add 2 questions to the equation. The identity model poses the 2 questions: who are we, and what do they think of us, what is their image of us? We're going to add 2 more: who do we want to be, and how will we be known? When we have those 3 questions in the air, it's really pretty much the entire enterprise of the organization that we're dealing with. It's not only who have we been and who would we like to be, but how are we going to relate to all of those members of our wider family that we call our stakeholders. And it is only when we get to this point that we have the full model of alignment that stands behind the corporate brand. Now, one of the things that this kind of modeling raises is the issue of, well, what happens when we don't have brand alignment? What happens when there are gaps between, incoherences among the top managers who formulate strategic vision, the employees who create the organizational culture, and the many, many different stakeholders who form their own way of thinking about the brand and the organization in ways that often give us consternation, if not worse. This particular way of thinking about an organization gives us a set of things to worry about, and we can formulate these in many, many different ways, but this is probably the most general way to think about the problems of misalignment. When do employees support the strategic direction? What happens if they don't? Do stakeholders trust management, or do they have mistrust? In this day and age, we have an enormous amount of mistrust, just generic mistrust in corporations. What is that doing to the link between our ability to formulate ideas about where we're headed and their willingness to support us in those directions? And of course, the old walking the talk problem: when do the stakeholders' expectations agree with what we're actually delivering, and do we have some issues there? There are many different ways, of course, that we could ask those questions. We thought that we might present just a couple of ideas in relation to the Unilever brand, which is one of the really more complicated organizations that has a corporate branding problem that they're taking on fairly seriously at the present time. Unilever, as you may know, has come up with a new corporate brand, a new logo, and a new strategic vision based on Vitality for Life. They are trying to align. They have reduced the number of products that they support with this corporate brand dramatically over the last 10 years. And they are trying now to get all the different products aligned behind the idea of vitality. And of course, they have to interpret that notion through the lens of the subcultures that make up this organization. So questions of coherence between the vision and the culture, having to do with whether employees actually relate to the vitality mission and whether or not they support it. And on the stakeholder side, issues about whether or not this vision is even relevant to external stakeholders, let alone how the way in which they're delivering against that mission sits with the members of the stakeholder communities that they exist to serve. On the culture side, of course, we can look at a few of their sub-brands, Ben & Jerry's, Dove, Axe, and ask ourselves, do these all express vitality? And if so, how do we create coherence for the corporate brand from so many different types of products that this organization represents? Axe in particular is interesting because we can see in the Dove products and the Inner Beauty campaign that Unilever has put forward that in fact they're trying to deal with an issue of vitality, particularly for young women, an issue of feeling beautiful rather than living up to the standards perhaps that have been set in some societies for beauty that make so many young women feel inadequate. Ben & Jerry's challenges that vitality mission. What does it mean to have healthy premium ice cream? Unilever has almost destroyed that ice cream brand because they've put a lot of air in to take some of the fat out, and the consumers of that particular brand have been complaining and complaining like crazy, and Ben himself is not too happy. So issues of that sort of coherence are very, very difficult. And of course, Axe, the young man's deodorant sold with good old sex. Does this fit the vitality mission? Well, certainly for young men, I'm sure it does. For the rest of us, it presents some challenges to the coherence of this corporate brand. And then on the stakeholder side, of course, you can really explode when you think about all the many different ways in which stakeholders form images and the types of images they form. Unilever is truly a global brand. It's sold around the world, and in some of those places in which it works, there are even legal reasons why they can't own their own companies. So Hindustan Unilever is a very special case, and they have, because of the control in that firm, gone their separate way on many occasions. How do you deal with that in terms of creating that coherence between vision, culture, and images? And of course, all the critics, all the people who come to that organization saying, you know, we really don't like what you're about, we're going to use your symbolism against you, we'll boycott your products, we'll do what we can to destroy you. So there are massive global differences of the brand expressions and, of course, the interpretations made of the brand, and stakeholders really do get to make their own meaning with your symbols. The identity conversation tells us that that's okay. That is as it is. We cannot change that, but we can, through management, successful management of the identity conversation, really come to a new understanding that I think begins to move us in the direction of what we're calling right now the enterprise brand. But before we get to those issues, I want Maiken to have a few words to say here, and I'll be back with you in a minute. Maiken?